So what changes have you seen in your students' mathematical thinking since you started using this routine?
One of the big changes I've seen is instead of, I don't have a lot of number pulling anymore and like random guessing. I have students really slowing down and finding that important information and pulling out the information in the text. And because of that, they're able to understand what to do with the numbers, whereas before they would just pull the numbers out, rush through it, and kind of do the operations they think that they should have done instead of like taking what's actually happening in the story and using that to help solve the problems.
What have you learned about your students and their mathematical thinking as a result of this routine?
One of the biggest things I've been able to learn is what students are able to pull out the important information and what students still can't. So initially it was, I had this group of students who could plow through, they could find the important information and move on. And then I had some students who couldn't figure out what was important at all, which makes a lot of sense because they're the ones who have a really hard time solving word problems in general. So because of that, I was able to take the students who didn't understand the word or what was important to pull out, and then the group focused less on how to solve the word problem, but more on, so what is the information that's important and why? And they're also learning that like from their partners. As their partners tell them why, they get that repeated reinforcement as to why it's important. So that was the big learn from my students. That and the ones who can explain their thinking and not. So I have students who have it, they get it, they understand it. They can't tell you why. They can't tell you why it's important or why they did what they did. And so then that other piece of it's important to explain and just kind of pushing them to do it more. So that was the two interesting things, was who can't figure out what's important to save their life and those who can't explain what's important. It was really eye-opening with a lot of my students.
Have you seen changes in those behaviors from both groups of students?
Yeah, I think the talking has helped. The having to explain why has helped the students who normally struggle with the math discourse and the talking about their thinking. Have learned to think deeper about why they're doing things, knowing the expectation is to explain. And then the students who couldn't figure out what's important, by having their partner repeatedly tell them what's important, and that why piece helps them to see that, as well as if partner A shares and they have everything highlighted, when they start telling why, partner B can kind of jump in and teach into their mistake. If that makes sense. So that discourse, that talking has really helped better than any small group I could pull, if that makes sense.
In what ways have you made modifications, or are there modifications you're thinking about doing to this routine as you've been exploring with it?
I think one of the biggest modifications to my teaching in general using this strategy is giving like tons of time. So before you do like 3 or 4 word problems and plow through, and this one it's a lot less work focused and more like that discourse focus, that talking about the math, which has kind of moved itself into like other pieces of math teaching, where before like you're like, okay, turn and talk when there's time or as a filler, but that explaining why piece has kind of bled from this shared reading strategy into like all of their discourse in math, which I've seen an increase as a result of that in their ability to explain their thinking and everything they're doing right now. Which has been really cool to see. So the focusing on the questioning in the shared reading strategy has kind of changed my brain to add those kinds of questions and thinking and talk time into my like other lessons, and it's been really beneficial. And so even my students who in the past have been traditionally really low are able to not only do the math now, but explain like what they're doing step by step and why. So that's been a huge change. It's been really cool to see.
Is there anything else you want to comment on?
No, it just takes time. Like the first few times I've done it, it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel right. It just takes time. And then as I've gone forward in the practice, it goes a lot faster. So once they know what to do, they can just kind of stream through it. So I think that like for me the biggest thing was just taking all that precious math time to teach and rework the strategy, but now I see it in their independent work, I see it on their assessments. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, is just like giving myself that time, to not wasted time, but that extra time in math where you feel so pressured to get things done. So it's definitely paid off.
Well, Thank you.